I think Kevin Durant just played his last game as a Phoenix Sun. We saw last night he went down with an ankle injury versus the Rockets, where they lost almost by 40 points. And he is expected to miss about a week with his ankle injury. And the Suns are the 11th seed out west. Now, there's a perfectly good chance that they could still take the 10th seed from Dallas, I believe. But with no Durant, and I mean, Beal hasn't been playing, even though they've looked pretty good without Bradley Beal recently. But they just, I think his time as a Phoenix Sun is over. Again, assuming they don't make the play-in and playoffs, but I mean, Durant's time as a Phoenix Sun hasn't been great. I mean, the 22-23 season was that first year that um, Durant got traded to them. They were 45 and 37, so they were 8 games above 500, and they lost in the semifinals. But again, that first year, pretty much it really wasn't with him until like the last little bit of the season, and then the playoffs. Um, then last year, they were 49 and 33. They were almost a 50-win team, but they lost in the first round to, I believe it was Minnesota. I think Minnesota swept them. Um, and which was, underwhelming, even though they were, I believe, the quote unquote underdogs in that series. And then this year they're 35 and 40. They have a losing record, and they're about to miss the playoffs. Another thing to note about the time with Kevin Durant, three different coaches the Phoenix Suns have had. That first year of Durant was Monty Williams. Then last year was Frank Vogel, and this year was Mike Budenholzer. And it's a rough time because, I mean, obviously the talent that Devin Booker and Kevin Durant are, they are enough to get you in the playoffs and be like one of the top duos in the league. Even Bradley Beal is still a good player. It's just his contract that surrounds his name is what people really look at and make it the worst thing, because it is a really bad thing, especially with the no trade clause. But it just Kevin Durant. I don't know where Kevin Durant will go next year, because again, everybody would love a Kevin Durant on their team, but he makes a lot of money. Um, he makes, to be exact, 51 million this year, and then next year is 50, almost 55 million, and that is a lot of money to pay for a 36-year-old um, NBA player. And he's not just an NBA player; still an All Star, one of the greatest players of all time. And by the season time next year starts, he'll be 37. But it's just the contract and the second apron, first apron, luxury tax, all these things that I really don't know the true meanings to, affects a lot of these teams. Like, sure, I mean, the two that pop out right off the page immediately is back to OKC, because they do have the contracts as of right now. But you got to think they got to pay J Dub, they got to pay Chet, they got to pay. I mean, they're paying Shea a whole lot of money already. And I mean, like even the players on their bench that are young, like Case and Wallace and all these guys like that, are going to get some money too if they want to keep them, which they won't be able to keep them all, of course. But adding Kevin Durant to that really limits who you can keep, because you're not letting go of J Dub or Chet. So, and the second team is Houston. Houston, I think, is the best suitor that pops right off the page without thinking about it too much, because Houston has a lot of young players that could maybe thrive in a different area because of all the talent that is around them, but it's just what will the Phoenix Suns want to do as well, because I feel like with the Suns, I would look for a package of, like, if you want to go like retool to almost rebuilding, you want to, maybe you want to probably get some draft picks, and Houston has that. But they also have a guy, like, you could get a Jalen Green in return, but that to me you would only want Jalen Green if you're getting rid of at least one of Booker or Bradley Beal. And who knows if they're doing that, because Booker is one of the Phoenix Suns' greatest players in their franchise history. So who knows if they're gonna want to get rid of him, or if they're just going to take a step back, get rid of Durant, get rid of this last year with Bradley Beal and his awful no trade clause, and then try and just rebuild around him with what they have. But if you are just going to try and wipe the floor, then I would look at, like, if you were to trade Durant to the Rockets, I would look for like a, maybe if you get Jalen Green and like a Jabari Smith, because again, if Houston is going to add Kevin Durant, you got to think the 100% starters next year is Alperen Sengun and Amen Thompson is pretty much never going to not start, especially on this team, I think. So that's your center locked away, and then Amen could really be any of those positions, but you probably want to get the ball in his hands a little bit more, as Fred VanVleet is not under contract after this year, and that he hasn't been re-signed yet. So we'll see if they keep him or not. I kind of hope not, because again, I want Amen Thompson to take that full on, at least one of the guard spots or one of the lead guard spots. Because I think is very capable of doing so, and he's such a unique player that having him as your one guard is just an advantage over, a lot of guards that are, not as big. But so again, and you probably want to have guys like I assume they would re-sign Dylan Brooks. I don't know what his contract is. Dylan Brooks is still under contract for the next 2 years after this. So I assume a guy like Dylan Brooks would still start. So that's another one of your forwards. And you probably want to have another guard in there that can be a little bit more consistent with shooting and maybe can defend a little too, because I love Jalen. Jalen Green's one of my favorite players, but he's not a very consistent scorer, as much as you probably would hope for him to be in his fourth season. And again, it's only his fourth season, so he still can 100% get better, and especially at that. But that's just a thing, I think. But if you are taking on Jalen Green and Jabari, we'll just use that for an example, you're not going to get like 3-4 first round picks as well, because you are getting real players that are still young and still have a lot to prove and could still potentially be I think Jalen Green could be an all-star if he gets to be consistent and get to be like a real number one, number two option, because in Houston, like, Jalen Green is supposed to be the one option in my eyes, but there's times where he doesn't even close games, and that's mainly because of who their coach is and how he likes to play, which I don't mind that at all, because if Jalen Green's cold and say, Aaron Holiday or Tari Eason is having a better game, especially since they're better defensively, then I mean, yeah, sure, sit Jalen Green if he's not having the greatest game. So even if the Suns were to trade Booker, I think Booker is another great thing for Houston to get, and I think it could be a similar package. But the only thing is, I don't think you make up the money with just Jalen Green's contract, because Jalen Green didn't get a real full rookie max like some of those other guys like Franz Wagner did. So, and Jabari I don't think has been extended yet, so he's not making a lot of money. But other guys that could maybe look for Kevin Durant services, it's not a lot unless, again, you're gutting your roster. Like, I think I don't know if and I don't know the contract terms or how everybody's cap looks, but I'm sure Denver is a second apron team, but Michael Porter Jr. makes a good amount of money. You would probably have to trade Michael Porter Jr. and Aaron Gordon at least, which do you really want to do for again a super old, Durant? Probably not. As of recently, we've heard things about the Timberwolves, which I assume would look like a Julius Randle and like Jaden McDaniels trade. Um, and that ups your offense for sure, but then that really gets rid of the defensive identity that Minnesota's really tried to build. And sure, you still got guys like Nikhil on the bench, DiVincenzo, but DiVincenzo I feel like would be a hot guy on the market. Nas Reed, another guy that would be hot on the market too, I think, to a lot of teams. And again, they have a lot of money paid to people over there, so it depends. I mean, sure, a big three of the Spurs, but who knows what that would take for you to give up? Probably like a Jeremy Sohan, and like some of the other younger guys on the bench. I don't think you give up Castle in that trade. I wouldn't do it, even though obviously Castle doesn't project to be what Durant is, but are you going to trade a guy that could be, really good for the next few years in Castle for the last couple years of an aging Durant? I don't think so. I mean, he's not going to go to any of these other bottom feeder teams in any conference. Toronto, no. Miami, no. Chicago. I mean, he's not. I can't imagine him going anywhere out east unless he's like a let's try and raise the floor of like a Detroit, maybe. But other than that, I doubt it. And I think just Kevin Durant is a lot of people don't like Kevin Durant because of how he has handled his career, obviously going from OKC to Golden State. Not many people in the basketball world liked him at all unless you were a Golden State Warriors fan, and I can fully admit that. And but then also, the way things ended with Golden State ended sour, and he went to Brooklyn where he looked great after the torn Achilles, I believe it was. And again, he looked almost better than he did before. But obviously, the Brooklyn thing didn't really amount to anything. And then Phoenix is his worst stop of his career, in my opinion. He didn't accomplish much. It was kind of a waste of 2.5 years. And I don't really think I never thought it was a good fit. I thought he was getting traded at the deadline and he was going to, but he backed out of it and said, no, no, I don't want to get traded. And the Suns, did right by him, even though they didn't have to, which I respect. But Durant is still one of the best ceiling and floor raisers there is in the game. Again, some people question his number one, like title. Can he be a number one? He was the number one in Golden State. And now, granted, he had Stephen Curry, who was another one of the greatest players of all time and was a number one as well. It's one of the few cases where you have two legit number ones on the team. But I think Durant just needs a good structured team because if we're being on, like, right, OKC had structure to them. They got to the finals super early on. They were about to go back to the finals, but then they blew the 3-1 to Golden State in the 2016 playoffs, which again is what led to him going to Golden State in the next season. But Golden State was obviously super structured. They had Klay Thompson, they had Draymond Green, they had Iguodala, they had a bunch of guys off the bench. Brooklyn, they were built great, whether you think of the 1 year basically that they had with Harden or the year that, with Kyrie, even though all of the, stuff that happened through the bubble. And then, he was out for some time. Again, Harden wasn't the greatest in Brooklyn, and then Phoenix, where they kind of threw him with Devin Booker. They traded Chris Paul for Bradley Beal. They traded DeAndre Ayton for Yusuf Nurkic, and it's like you got. I've talked about it so many times how Booker, Beal, and Durant are all I want the ball so I can get to my spot and score kind of guys. Um, Booker has done a I think, a great job in the past few years with these guys becoming like a great playmaking guard, and he even stepped up his defensive stuff when needed to. Again, he's not the perfect defender by any means, but neither of them are. And but again, the team is just their depth has been so bad. Again, they had use of Nurkic, who was not a center you would want for a team like this, because Yusuf Nurkic liked having the ball in his hands to make plays and do things that most centers don't do unless you are like a Jokic or a Sabonis or a Sengun even and it just didn't fit. They didn't have real point guard play after they traded Chris Paul until this year, and it was working. The first part of this season for the Suns was great. Kevin Durant was a legit MVP candidate, but then he got hurt. Booker missed some time. Beal's missing time currently. And it just gone was so far downhill to the point where, again, as of right now, you are below the Dallas Mavericks, who traded away Luka, didn't have AD for over a month of time, has lost Kyrie Irving, and you're just below teams like them, Sacramento, and I think every team above them is pretty much better than them. Maybe the Clippers are technically better than, but I mean, the fact that they might legit miss the playoffs altogether because again, they're 35 and 40, but the Kings, who are the 10 seed right now, are 36 and 38. They have two less losses and one more win, so that's going to take some work to get by them, and they only have 7 games left. So, we'll see. Again, their contract situation is no good either, so I don't really know what they do if they are keeping Durant, which again, it isn't likely. We've heard from Brian Windhorst and all these guys that he's gonna not be on the Suns anymore, but the time in the time in Phoenix has just been such a waste, and it's so unfortunate because I really think Kevin Durant could have gotten another ring, whether you look at the Brooklyn year where he had the 50-point game in game 6 or in game 7, with the toe on the line and everything like that, which is the year the Bucks ended up winning, or even just other years like they were still a good team. They just had that was an unfortunate time. I mean, they got swept by my Celtics in the 21-22 playoffs, but the year before they beat the Celtics 4-1. But again, it just didn't his time as a Sun didn't amount to much, and it's unfortunate that it's ending with an injury and ending with no play, like pretty much no play in or playoffs unless something insane happens. So that's really it. Again, we'll come back whenever there's news happening. Playoffs are right around the corner. We got less than 10 games to go for everybody. And we'll be talking about playoffs as they come around the corner. We'll talk about play in and everything that is happening. So